by the time you've figured out inside of an office what you're going to do, then there's a new trend happening, right? So you have to kind of make sure that you truly have partners who are living in this space, not looking at it solely from a data point of view or that focus group point of view, because it's going to be too removed. And you have to be actually a bit ahead of the curve in order to be able to, hit the mark. So it's understanding really about values and why the values are that they are and what the cultural narrative is like. And the only way to understand that is to really be like crazy like we are and just we're deep into this stuff like all day, every day.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Love to talk about trends and things that are going on in marketing, things that are going on in society and how they all interact. So I'm excited to talk to Lauren Coleman because that's the world that she lives and breathes in. And Lauren, you wear a lot of different hats based on your contributions to Forbes and your other activities. Your LinkedIn is just as crowded as mine. So how do you allocate your time during the day? Like what are you typically working on? Is it where you're working a half a week on something and then you pivot into something else? Or, how do you organize your time?
Well, I guess first let me start by giving like context in terms of what I do, and I can talk about,
Sure.
How I allocate time. But so essentially I am what's called a future media innovationist. So that means that I am tracking, talking about, consulting around, creating all around the space of the intersection of emerging technology and mass media and entertainment, and most specifically for demographics between 18 to 24, 34. That is my wheelhouse. I always say I was in that demographic before I was 18, and I will be the 90-year-old in the nightclub talking about like, that's the hot song. That's just very, very natural for me.
Right.
So you're right. This takes a number of different forms. So I guess the first is that I run an agency called Link. It's spelled phonetically LNK. And essentially it is that, an innovation strategy consulting firm and a media studio where we help clients, whether they're brands, a lot of recording artists and more, be able to really navigate this wonderful, crazy, Wild West space of emerging technology and how it can be used to do two things, either, create greater reach or greater revenue, or certainly both. So I should say three things. The main pillars that we focus on are AI, 5G, now moving into 6G, digital currency, Web3, and anything like 3D, XR, immersive spatial computing, which for those who might not know, spatial computing is just think Apple Vision Pro, the glasses coming up. We absolutely love this and excel at it. And I can give some different examples of who we've worked with, and, that it's just something that I absolutely am passionate about. I want to make sure that nobody is really left behind as we move into this new era, because technology moves very quickly, and we have this really wonderful space right now where different partnerships are being created and strategic alliances. And once that's set, kind of think of like musical chairs. If you don't have a seat, it's going to be really quite challenging to be able to generate revenue, wealth, and really just fit into society. So we're all about information and being able to drive all that. So that's one. And again, the through line is always emerging technology, mass media and entertainment, primarily 18 to 24, 34-year-olds. So I also have an agency that represents me to speak about this space. It's called Leading Authorities. I've been with them for the last couple of years and have spoken at keynotes and conferences around the world in this area. I also speak as well just at companies themselves, which are maybe looking for presentations on this. They're maybe like experiencing not really FOMO just yet, but maybe what I call FOG, right? So fear of jumping in. And they're looking for really how to decipher, decode, demystify, all of these elements they're hearing about. How do you best use them, and how can you use them organically within a larger cultural context? That's what I bring, to the table to help them be able to kind of make sense of it from a more a warmer point of view. So that's I guess wheelhouse number two. I also, as you mentioned, I write about this. I was a Forbes contributor in the innovation section for many years, but right now I have an innovation column for NASDAQ's news site. Of course, we all know what NASDAQ is. It has its market site, which I love, really working with that team and writing on this space. Again, always looking at innovation and entertainment and media, that sweet spot. And I think that's almost kind of it. But parenthetically, I also have an AI-driven media startup that I am working on. I started working on this before AI was quote unquote sexy, probably like 8 years ago. And people were like, "Oh, Lauren, you're so academic." And I'm like, no, AI has massive implications for popular culture and media. And now we see that this is, true. So I'm really proud to say that concept won earlier this year a grant competition from UBS Bank, investment bank. And so I have a mentor inside of there now who's helping me be able to kind of take it to the next level. So very excited about that too. And then I too have a nonprofit that I started. It's called Game Change, and it is really intended to be able to support women of color working toward leadership positions at the intersection of emerging technology and mass media and entertainment. What many don't know, but you probably do, Kevin, since you're so very much into data and such an expert at what you do. When people of color and women of color actually out index in terms of utilizing so many different either emerging technology platforms or more interested, out indexing more interest about digital currency. If you look at like Coinbase's recent report, or using more minutes on their mobile phones than any other demographic, et cetera, but they're not nearly sharing enough in the equity, right? If you post more frequently to social media, then that means you are driving that platform and helping them to generate ad dollars. I want to make sure that women who are interested in being able to do this, whether they're founders or on a corporate career track, are able to really start to be heard and seen and have the tools to be able to kind of become more visible, in this space. So we're in talks right now, which I'll be able to probably speak about more in February, with a multinational consumer brand who's going to be our partner on this, creating documentaries and resources and toolkits and, leadership development training. And I'm very excited about it. So to go back to your original question, how do I, do it? It's all throughout the day. It's like kind of just juggling. It just works well with my super type A personality. I tend to get bored if it's one thing for too long. So it's kind of just like a conductor leading an orchestra all day, kind of in my mind. There are certain deadlines that I have. Typically my stories run on like NASDAQ on a Thursday. So I might have, okay, it's Tuesday, I have to like make sure that story is done. But there are it just kind of flows. And it works for me. It might not be the optimum for other people, but like I said, it's not like I'm doing, I don't know, technology and then cooking and then, I don't know, automotive, like something, right? That would be insane, but it's all the same. It's just taking different forms. And I love it. I guess I'm also a serial entrepreneur. This is my second agency, and the startup will be my first, I guess, product-based company. But I started my kind of, I guess, entrepreneurial path after I came to New York. I'm originally from Pennsylvania. I came to New York to go to Columbia University and was an English major. What else? Who's a media junkie? And my first real job out of college was working at MTV, back when they actually played music videos, although I am eternally 27 years old. And I stayed there for a few years, and I was always interested in the news and was just too hard to get in. And I was in production, which actually turned out being a great thing in the past several years. And then I ended up working at what was at the time one of the hottest marketing companies in the music industry, called Round the Globe. This was during the time which we all call the golden era of hip hop. So this was when, for those who are fans, when Dre dropped The Chronic and Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style and Cypress Hill's Black Sunday, seminal albums, that the majors didn't really know what to do, because there was no hip hop really, department in major record labels. So they farmed it all out. So this company was one of those, which had a number of those projects. And I stayed there for a little while, but I knew that all things digital and technology was coming down the pike. And I just wanted to do more proof of concept around that. So kind of similar to you, how you said you have this entity where you can, kind of play around without getting any smacks on your wrist. I just wanted to do that inside of my own agency. So I kind of started out, if people are thinking about how do you do this, I just simply went to the head of the company. It was a small boutique agency. And I said, why don't you pay me half and I'll just come in half the time? And he was like, pay me half. He was like, great. And the other half, I started my first agency called Punch Media Group for 10 years. Started in my really small studio apartment in Soho, and it just grew and grew and grew. My first clients were Virgin Records, and then what was at the time a leading publication in this space, this music space. And it just grew from there to eventually me working on projects for massive names. I mean, Ice Cube, co-producing like Snoop Dogg's first ever online concert, creating a whole kind of digital, what we called, back then it wasn't called digital, but kind of mobile marketing. We just called it, I don't even know what we called it, but that's what we would call it now. Digital campaign. When Jay-Z decided he wanted to take Rockaware internationally, my company was the lead one out of my Paris office, because I created offices in New York, LA, and in Paris, to be able to help with kind of the introduction of that to the Western European market. And a lot of the work that we did, contributed to his being able to sell that company to another company, apparel brand called Iconics brand, for what still is a streetwear record of $160 million today. So this kind of on the other side of that, this kind of more consulting agency, and what I'm doing now in this space is, I guess I kind of cut my teeth 10 years doing that for Punch Media Group, that now I have a foundation where I can move from, one area to another with a bit more ease. I have the relationships and access and so much more. But yeah, that's pretty much like my focus. And I love what I do. I'm really just so fortunate to have entered the music space, which is always going to be my foundation. When I did, because of, kind of the advent of hip hop becoming a massive commercial success. And it's not only that, but it obviously drives youth culture in America and beyond. So when I am brought in to speak to different corporations, like I recently was asked to speak at the ad agency Droga5, which many of your listeners know, I'm sure, is part of Accenture. It's from a very much hands-on approach, and that which has a lot of innate and very unique expertise around, hip hop, boots on the ground, but also I've learned how to code, although, it's very basic. And I learned, several years ago, I don't even know what would happen if I sat at a computer to do that now. But, bringing these various sensibilities together is really quite unique. And it's just kind of a reflection of myself, both as a person and as a business runner. So yeah, that's me. And I just love any and everything to do with, this space and branding and marketing. And I'm just excited to see where it goes and, to be able to support people and companies wherever I can with it.
Yeah, I love the fact that the Venn diagrams for all the initiatives sort of overlap. So It's not, as you indicated, completely disparate things where you basically have to turn your brain off and like boot it back up again on gardening or whatever.
But you know what I think is funny, though, that many times people will ask me this. I don't think they ask. I mean, I'm not comparing myself, of course, in wealth to this, but no one asks, like, Elon Musk, how do you run Twitter and talk about going to space and, this and that? And those things are very disparate, but It's just like, oh, that's a given. And I don't know if we think about that in terms of like men, or because media like trains you about how to think about somebody, so therefore you think about them that way. I don't know, but I remember, being asked this even before, particularly in Western Europe.
I'm only missing one element in the full marketing lab now, which would be a publishing entity of sufficient to really do something fun with.
I love that.
I failed to buy Gawker in 2018, but I did try to buy.
Did you make a run for it?
Yeah, yeah. When you Google my name of Gawker, you see because I wanted to turn it into Gawker for good and make it philanthropic. So,
okay.
And then I tried to buy Jezebel a couple of weeks ago, but
yes.
I was not the high bidder there. So that will probably. I don't think it's been announced yet who the winner was. I haven't.
Oh, I think I saw it in Ad Age, but I forget who it was. But I think just like the other day,
Yeah,
they noted that, okay, Jezebel has finally been bought by X, but I'm sure listeners are probably Googling right now if they don't know already who it was. But yeah,
yeah,
you are talking my language now about, anything media, content,
yeah.
communication, I just think is massively
So
important.
one thing
So
I've
maybe it'll
noticed
be
that,
third time is the charm for you. I hope so.
well, no,
Remember
what
us
was
little
interesting is,
people, when you buy something mega, remember us.
well, yeah, I mean, I can't afford anything mega, right? I need something that's an underutilized asset, really, for me to be able to experiment on. Sometimes you end up with something that you can't really run experiments on. Because I
Mm.
had originally tried to buy Lenny Letter from Lena Dunham and Jenny Connor when they shut it down.
Hmm.
And eventually they donated it to Giving Forward, but only the archives, right?
Ah,
So I
okay.
can't publish new things on there because they didn't want any new things being published. So that doesn't give me a
Right.
laboratory to do anything.
Right, right, right.
We're monetizing the archives on behalf of a nonprofit cause on their behalf.
Well, that's good.
So sometimes the obstacle is the way, as Ryan Holiday would say. But we'll have to see on the publishing side if I can find something small or medium sized to
We'll
experiment.
put that out there. Ask Santa. This is the
But
season.
I'd love to get your perspective on something I've noticed manifests itself differently in different segments of, so let's say, the creator space, of which music is a big one,
Hmm.
which is that some of the influencers or VIPs or creators or whatever you want to call them really are starting to act much more like broadcasters or publishers, depending on what their modality is, right? And others don't, and are sort of still very, very tied into whatever their favorite platform is, right? So you'll see like TikTokers or Instagrammers or YouTubers, right? And so they really just think about, well, that's my vehicle, right, to get
Hmm.
my content out. Whereas others, you can see they're starting to think a little bit more like a broadcaster and a publisher. Like, wait a minute, I need to have more of an ownership relationship, more of a direct relationship with my fan, right? And so whether that becomes an email list, that is their fan club, or whether it becomes, some other way that they're using. I mean, the perfect example of like who's done it in many ways and is also a multipreneur, right, would be Mr. Beast, right? He's got chocolate, he's got burgers, right? He's got his YouTube channel, and he's also got a smaller footprint on some of the other platforms, but he has a direct relationship with me, despite me not watching much of his content, because I buy his chocolate, right? So,
Hmm.
that chocolate becomes his hook to have my email address, right? And
Right.
so, do you see that within music, that some of the more forward-thinking creators are like, wait a minute, like I don't want to build my house on top of somebody else's foundation. I also want to have my own direct relationship with my fans, right? Are some of them really much more active in trying to pursue that direct relationship than
I
others?
think that that's a great question. I guess the shorter answer is some and some not. So we just, spoke about, just loving business and being entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial minded. That is something where I believe is kind of coded into one's DNA. So either, you kind of gravitate toward that, or you really truly are, a creator, and you sit there and you write like lyrics, and you don't really, that's why you have a, manager and a team and all that. You're not really
Right.
so interested in that. I think that it has always been the case that there is a more, what we say, ancillary opportunities around a recording artist, depending on how good their team is and how, I guess, advanced they are in their thinking. Sometimes that has not always been the case with so many managers. I think in any other genre except maybe like pop, like if you look like at a Taylor Swift or somebody who's like, okay, Beyonce's considered black music, but now of course like pop, right? So they have a certain type of level of thinking around them that is so high that of course they're going to be able to, kind of have all these different things. If you're looking at other levels, it really then comes down to, like I said, whether the individual is just really like out there hustling or not. I think certainly hip hop is most indicative of that, because it is known for its entrepreneurial spirit. For those, listening who know or familiar with, Master P, I mean, he only got to where he is because he was like, nobody believes in me. I'm going to sell these mixtapes out of the back of my trunk until things like happen. That's just how it is. As we say in hip hop, getting put on, right? That's the only way I'm going to get put on, is to do it myself.
Right.
So that was, talk about the ultimate direct relationship, right? With a fan or a potential fan. But then you can also have a more sophisticated approach now, which, if you look at a 50 Cent, who has really, just become, I feel like anything he touches like turns, to gold, right? He just keeps being successful with a series that, he produces, well, out of his production company, or the recent tour, which is not even finished just yet. And his kind of direct relationship, it's different, because yes, it is primarily still housed, if you will, on Instagram, but he's very communicative and very, I don't know if he gets up and thinks like, what's going to be my CTA today? Like, what's my call to action? Do you know what I mean? When he had issues with Stars, when Stars was not negotiating the way he wanted them to, with the earlier days of Power, and Power, let's face it, really brought Stars out of cemetery, right? Because nobody was really checking for most programming on Stars. And it wasn't working out the way 50 wanted. He was like, Instagram, you know what? Unsubscribe right now. Take off your subscription, right? And Stars was like, okay, maybe we should go back to the negotiating table, right? So I think you can still have these direct relationships on platforms. It just depends on how you are using them. But I think there are also those who are doing that, and then also, have their own, what will we say, separate platforms they're creating. I know what I've heard, though, recently, especially in the emerging technology space. I had the opportunity to interview Money B from Digital Underground the other week, because he was going to be speaking on this panel about 6G. And he was talking about actually how challenging it is a lot of times for hip hop artists in general, people of color, whatever, when they are talking with a tech company, a smaller one, right? Or a newer one, or one that's not Google, at the Google level, let's just say, and saying, you know what, I'm happy to work with you, because of course they are eager to get somebody who's, credible and in the music space, and more particularly in the hip hop space, which is driving all of this. And he says, I'm happy to work with you, but I would like to talk about like equity. How can we, work with this? And he said, he couldn't tell me how many times that he's been told, no, we're not interested in that. We just want to pay you something and, say something about it. And then that's that. So, and he's like, I'm not interested in doing those type of deals anymore, because I know the value that I bring to that. Right. So I think it is something that is continuing to, evolve, but I do, agree with you that it is a very smart place to be. It's also great too, if, said artist is working with a larger consumer brand and they can pull all those things together. That's like amazing. But, a lot of times you will see these breakthroughs. I remember that's how Ryan Leslie, recording artist and producer, blew up, because he was like, okay, I'm going to really go direct to fans. I'm going to take them video wise to be able to kind of be with me on my journey, see what that looks like to try to get a record deal, and how challenging that is and how hard that is. And while you're doing it, sign up for, my messages like via phone, right? So SMS marketing, really kind of early days of SMS.
Sure.
And it was kind of positioned as, you can text me and not me directly, but still, one of the first times that this was done many years ago, and people really ate it up, right? And when he walked into a label meeting, he had so much data behind him that they would be, fools to say no. Yeah. So I would like to see that more. And I think that the intersection of that, certainly with what we're seeing coming up with Web3, is going to be massively powerful. Yeah, massively.
Yeah, clearly not every artist, they have to be good at their art, right?
Of course.
They happen to also be great business people. That's a win for them, because they can guide their team perhaps a little bit more effectively if they're also an innate business person. But if they're not, I can see elements or arguments in both directions regarding it should be their PR/publicist who handles a lot of this sort of let's build our own email list, let's build our own SMS list, let's choreograph our communications with our fans, right? Because it builds our value as a brand, right? Or builds the artist's value as a brand. But you could also say, no, it's the agent, right? Because it's in the agent's best interest that the value of the brand be higher so that they can get more for the movie, cameos, and they can get more for the brand placements, right? So, or
I
is
see
it
what you're saying, but I really
collaboration?
think it should really fall to management, right? So that's when you have a great manager, then a manager would then either direct, like you said, probably the PR team, even though it's really more marketing than PR,
Yeah.
but to, either bring on like an actual either consultant or an agency to do that, which is a lot of what my first business did, bring on an entity specifically to do that, because agents really are, if you are represented by, CAA or William Morris Endeavor, they are really focused solely on, either setting up the tour or getting you, performance dates, show dates. So they're not really in the business of that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's on the music side. Of course, if you're fortunate enough to have an agent who's representing you as an actor or whatever, I think that could be, maybe more easily worked through, that they could bring other people, into the space to be able to support for that. But their thing is like, matchmaking all day and every day, right? That's what they do. So yes, but I agree with you. It would behoove many different artists to have more of a business team, and that's how people get to where they are. I mean, even a Jay-Z, who's looked at as like, a god in this, didn't get there on his own, right? He had, people who were really killer at business around him, who he said, I see something in this person or that person, like, okay, how can we really expand this brand of me, right? I'm a businessman, right? In the lyrics. And he understood that, from the very beginning. So yes, I think it just depends on how much you want. But let's face it, not every artist is looking for the ultimate fan connection beyond performing. And that's, okay too. I think the only challenge is when, you want to and you just don't kind of know how to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, obviously a lot of outside of ticket-based revenue for a lot of these performers, they're also, relying on increasingly brand relationships.
Absolutely.
And with the brand relationships, I get the sense that in particular, the generations that you spend a lot of time researching and following, they crave authenticity, right?
Absolutely.
Not just like glue a particular VIP or creator with a brand and say, oh yeah, this works, right? So how should both the marketer and creator think about making sure that authenticity comes through, and not just allow an agent to come in there and broker a deal and say it's signed, sealed, and delivered, just sign here and, ready to go, when, it's not going to pass the smell test at any level.
Right. I absolutely agree with you. And it is so important, because we see time and time again so much money, time, and effort put forth. And you look at it and you're just like, either that's the best you came up with or that's what you came up with. Like, they're not actually going inside of the mind of a 22-year-old who is sitting in Atlanta or Oakland, or, you know what I mean? To be able to say, now that's hot, right? Because that's how I guess I have always been successful and, driven my team, is that if I could put myself in that person's space and say, that's hot, I have to have it, then it works. And you have to like feel it and love it. It has to drive like you to be massively compelled around this, not something that based on the data looks like. And too many people are in their office, which is great, but they don't look outside to see, well, who's actually moving in this space all day, every day, who we can get to come in just to like throw an eye on this and say, where might we tweak this or whatever.
Right.
Because it will save so much money, in the long run. And so, especially like you said, this is an era of, so many revelations, and authenticity being needed, up and down, is that you have to know what is authentic in order to know if you've matched it or not, right? And so you have to be able to understand the culture, and especially if you're looking at, 18 to 24, 34, so, kind of the junior side of that, the senior side not as much, but certainly the junior side. By the time you've figured out inside of an office what you're going to do, then there's a new trend happening, right? So you have to kind of make sure that you truly have partners who are living in this space, not looking at it solely from a data point of view or that focus group point of view, because it's going to be too removed, and you have to be actually a bit ahead of the curve in order to be able to, hit the mark. So it's understanding really about values and why the values are that they are, and what the cultural narrative is like. And the only way to understand that is to really be like crazy like we are, and just we're deep into this stuff like all day, every day. Like I don't know anything about like the 70-year-old golfer in Connecticut, but you ask me anything about that, you know what I mean? So you have to be completely absorbed into it and know, I think, what questions to ask, so that, you create kind of either campaigns or events that truly are authentic. I know I was talking to a company recently, which shall be nameless, and they were talking about a media partner that they were going to use for this event. And I was like, that media partner is seen like X and you're kind of seen like Y. Are you sure you want to be able to do that? Oh, we didn't think about that, right? And then they were going to have a different entity as a different type of partner. And I was like, okay, but that one has some legal issues around the head of that. Are you aware of that? Oh, no, we aren't, right? So it's really, really important, because these things have to be pulled off like so much on the money, because if you don't know, but the people who are there attending, listening, whatever, they know well, and they've looked at all of the YouTube channel reports about it and everything, you know what I mean? They're not looking at, Entertainment Tonight or whatever. They're looking at the peer to peer. Let me tell you, I watch some of these things, they're a crack up. And then, the person will give you all the reporting, and they're like, okay, I have to go because I have to get back to work now. But they're giving, all of this information at the moment it's happening. And it's just really, you have to stay really on the cusp of that and a little bit ahead. And I think, it's always going to be a win if you bring together some type of entertainment element with emerging technology to speak to this particular crowd, because that's where they're living, right, every day. And then to be able to kind of, I guess, put as a foundation with it a social impact add-on, then just really puts it over the top. Because too, we've seen things happen, like even when Facebook, aka Meta, did the metaverse concert, actually almost this time last year, with Biggie, Christopher Wallace's estate. And there was so much blowback on it, from the actual target audience. It was, said to be seen as a money grab. There was no really like kind of promotion around it. It was, a shame, because the technology worked perfectly. It looked amazing, but there was just not that cultural context around it. And this is really key. It is challenging, but that's what being, a good marketer is these days. So you have to look at fragments, you have to look at culture, and you have to even anticipate, what is kind of coming up. So that's kind of like always my top line, advice in that space. But you're absolutely right. It is critical.
On a related question, I'd love to get your perspective on something. I often see that brand managers and sometimes folks at agencies, they look at a particular segment of the population, and they think within that segment, it's homogeneous, but it's not. Right?
Absolutely.
So, they might be like, oh yeah, the Hispanic part of the population, and they act as if it's the Hispanic part of the population.
Right.
One message will resonate with all of them, and even within hip hop, there may be subcultures and subgroups within that. And sort of it, from the 30,000-foot view, it may look homogeneous, but once you're in the know, you're like, oh no, like that'll work for this third of the group, but for the other 2/3 of the group, it's going to come off badly, right?
Right.
So it really reinforces your point about being enough tied into the culture of those groups to sort of just know, it's going to pass the authenticity test, or it's going to be an effective use of your time and money. And because, it could be worse than a waste of money. It could actually end up with blowback. I think that was
Yes.
sort of the point, is that if you miss one of those nuances, you could actually end up with more negative social media chatter than positive.
Absolutely. You'd rather have nobody talking about you than someone talking about you badly. But I love how you, really touched on this point that there are, of course, multiple categories within a kind of larger chunk. And this was, I guess, kind of my approach, or kind of, spark to be able to create and write my first ebook that I wrote several years ago, which was called, well, the first one was called Rise of the Smart Power Class. And then the newer edition of it was America's Most Wanted, the Millennial decoding, quad decoding for this demographic. And so you're right. I took a deeper look, certainly, at this demographic, and found that there were a minimum of 4, subcategories, depending on values, mindset, et cetera, where you are in the country, and so much more. And so, I kind of I created it. I took a long time to research it, put it out there, self-published it. Amazon selected as one of its best new media studies. I thought, that's great. But, I was a little bit apprehensive about my theories. I'm not really one who's, super, like, I don't know. I guess I'm maybe more humble or whatever. I don't know. But anyway, I had a lot of gratification when I was asked to speak this virtual panel for Nokia not long ago about the metaverse, and they brought me in specifically to speak about 18 to 24, 34. Anyway, they had some speakers on there from a consulting company called Ipsos, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and they too started talking about, well, yeah, there's a minimum of 4, blah, 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 and so I was like, oh, great. Okay, I was talking like that in like 2016, so I'm very glad to see that, okay, I was ahead of the curve, and I am, actually it was accurate. But I just felt like, again, if you love people and you love the demographic actually that you're working with, then you can't help but see the differences. So yeah, I think that it's really, really killer. And don't do stuff that you don't know, or you have somebody in the fold who knows and loves it, because it'll show.
Yeah. So final topic I'd love to get into a little bit. 2024 will be an interesting year in so many ways, including AI and everything. But one year that'll be particularly active in is politics, political marketing, both
For
paid and earned,
sure.
right? I'd love to get your perspective on, the level to which you think creators in music and other genres of creativity should make themselves available for political marketing. Should they stay away from it, or
I
really
love this
based
topic.
on
It's
authenticity?
it's like a Christmas present for me, because I had the opportunity to live in DC for a year, and I got to deal with, politicos in their natural habitat, I like to say. And I was, invited to do things like create congressional briefings on diversity and tech on the Hill. And I got to know so many people, because I'm for like the party of Lauren DeLisa Coleman. So I'm, happy to talk with you no matter what, because I'm interested to just learn, how do you think? So I was trying to help many of them through this, but this was maybe a little bit too early for them. And I guess whatever that was, like maybe 2017, help them to be able to understand the cultural context again in what they're doing when they reach out to certain artists, to be able to either be part of the campaign or show up on the trail or whatever, and how to be able to better leverage it, and how to be able to interact, and in some cases, which certain artists don't want to be affiliated with particular parties, how to be able to better maybe manage that, as opposed to using the music and then getting the typical cease and desist order, and then it's just a nightmare, right? Again, I hate wasting time, and so why would you want to do that? So just being able to kind of work with them to be able to get a better handle on that. Like I said, I think it was a little bit too early. So yes, for 2024, I would love to be able to, help with that now, because let's be honest, if you're trying to reach, the younger demographic, again, you're typically going to do that through entertainment. You're typically going to do that through music. And a lot of times it's going to be, hip hop related. The other side of that is that hip hop artists are so vocal already, about this. I mean, at a certain point, everybody was glued to Cardi B's, Twitter, because she's going to say what she thinks about the government shutdown or this or that or whatever. Nobody's paying her. She wants to say something. Snoop was very, very vocal around, I think the first, Trump campaign, as well as Q-Tip from Tribe Called Quest, and, a lot of artists. It can be a challenge only if you take the position of the candidate which seems to run counter to what the demographic is looking at. So when you look at like a Sexy Red, who has recently said, great, on Trump, there's been some issues for her because hip hop is typically thought of as being more democratic, right? Because Republicans are seen as more, they have more issues around race. Whether this is the case or not, I'm not here to get into that, but that's what the messaging is. Yeah. But I think 2024, as you said, is going to be very interesting because certain artists are starting to break away from what has been seen as the norm and more saying, I'm for Trump or whatever. It's just going to be interesting, like kind of mix up. What's funny is part of, allegedly, the reason why Trump is resonating maybe with some other recording artists is because of the whole trial situation and how sometimes it is seen that the legal system is challenging as well for that demographic. So there's like a little bit of identification. Again, not saying whether it's right or wrong, just getting into the mindset. So I think anybody would be insane not to take advantage of partnerships in the music community, but to have a consultant to help you do it right, because I don't think it's, quite frankly, respected. So it's like, oh, let's just get so-and-so artist to come over and whatever. No, that's not, it's just going to be a potential mess. And like we both said, the demographic that's being targeted can smell something, a mile away. Is this actually authentically, really crafted? When you looked at, again, doesn't matter whether you're into either one or not, but Bernie and Cardi, they work well together, right? They both really got each other. I love the dialogue, right? What kind of content are you going to create around it, right? That's the whole thing. I mean, it really has to be actually looked at almost from a producer's point of view, right? How are you going to like manage this? And I think it could be just massively interesting, especially if you were to be able to bring two sides together with a recording artist. That's game over. Everybody will watch it. Let me not give anything away. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I was thinking about this back when I was in DC, because this was when Rand Paul was more, you have your celebs in politics, just like you do in entertainment, right? And they have their entourages. And Rand Paul was talking a lot about whatever that was really agitating certain, people in the hip hop space. And I just thought, oh my God, I would love to have like Chuck D and Rand Paul produce like a kind of a discussion between them. And maybe it's like at Howard, but you also like, he had it, of course, invitation only, but you could throw the projection of video to a wall outside so everybody could see it. I mean, like things like you have to make a thing of it, because you've got to get up over the noise, even with politics. Yeah. And I think, you leverage, that entertainment quality, right? Even though it is something which is very important to our lives, but just the tools that entertainment uses, yes, is like all day, every day. I had the opportunity to interview Mark, who is the CMO of P&G, a couple of times, both at Cannes Lion Festival and then at Viva Tech. And I believe he coined the term like brand citizenship. And I think that it is true. And I think more and more brands are going to have to think about, how do they kind of run this gauntlet with the recording artist, then, politics and just kind of social activism, it's going to just be more and more critical as time goes on.
Yeah, well, that it's going to be a fascinating year to watch, and so
yes, for sure.
For sure. Thanks so much for joining me.
My absolute pleasure. I want to also offer to your listeners, if they're interested, and it's completely free, you can go to my agency's site. It's L as in lemon, N as in Nancy, K as in key, agency, all one word. And if you go to the tab cultural intelligence. There's a report there that we just recently did looking at the convergence of emerging technology and really encouraging people to not just have their heads in the sand only about AI or only about Web3. What's really going to be happening is like a multivitamin, right? It is how you are combining these things and how that is going to give you competitive advantage. Feel free to download that PDF. And really just kind of think through some of the questions and the data that we have in there and some of the forecasts. I think it would be massively helpful.
Cool. And I'll also recommend they find you on LinkedIn. Is that
please do? Thank you so much. I also too do a podcast every Thursday called Beats and Bites. So if you want to get deeper into emerging tech, pop culture, and hip hop, it's on Apple and Spotify. And I'm always quite happy to just engaged. So yes, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Kevin doesn't want to mention it, but he is a fabulous speaker himself. He actually spoke at a panel that I put together on media and innovation back before the pandemic. I guess it was probably either 2018 or 2019, looking at the challenges around Cambridge Analytica and all that when that first broke. Back we did that at SAP's offices. They were nice enough to host us here in Hudson Yards. So I am glad to be able to come again full circle with the wonderful Kevin Lee, and thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.